The Odyssey by Homer.
Book 10. Aeolus, the Laestrygonians, and Circe. Arrival of Ulysses at the land of Aeolus, who gives him the winds in a bag. Folly of the seamen, who untie the bag while Ulysses is asleep. A tempest. Disastrous encounter with the gigantic Laestrygons. Arrival at the island of Circe. Transformation of the Greeks to swine, and recovery of their former shape. Preparations for a journey to the region of the dead.
We reached the Aeolian Isle, where Aeolus, dear to the gods, a son of Hippotas, made his abode. It was a floating isle, a wall of brass enclosed it, and smooth rocks edged it around. 12 children in his halls were born, 6 daughters and 6 blooming sons. He gave his daughters to his sons for wives, and they, with their dear father and his queen, banquet from day to day, with endless change of meats before them. In his halls all day the sound of pipes is in the perfumed air. At night the youths beside their modest wives sleep on fair couches spread with tapestry. So coming to his town and fair abode, I found a friendly welcome. 1 full month the monarch kept me with him, and inquired of all that might concern the fate of Troy, the Argive fleet, and the return to Greece. And just as it befell, I told him all. And when I spake to him of going thence, and prayed him to dismiss me, he complied, and helped to make us ready for the sea. The bladder of a bullock 9 years old he gave, in which he had compressed and bound the stormy winds of air. For Saturn's son had given him empire over the winds, with power to calm them or to rouse them at his will. This in our roomy galley he made fast with a bright chain of silver, that no breath of ruder air might blow. He only left the west wind free to waft our ships and us upon our way. But that was not to be. We perished by a folly of our own. 9 days we held our way, both day and night, and now appeared in sight our native fields. On the 10th night, where on the shore we saw men kindling fires. Meantime, a pleasant sleep had overcome my weary limbs, for long had I been guiding with incessant toil the rudder, nor would trust it to the hand of any other. Such was my desire to reach our country by the shortest way. Then talked my crew among themselves, and said, that I had brought with me from Aeolus, the large-souled son of Hippotas, rich gifts of gold and silver. Standing side by side and looking at each other, thus they said, "How wonderfully is our chief revered and loved by all men, wander where he will, into what realm soever. From the coast of Troy he sailed with many precious things, his share of spoil, while we, who with him went and with him came, are empty-handed yet. And now hath Aeolus, to show how much he prizes him, bestowed the treasures here. Come, let us see them. Let us know how much of gold and silver is concealed in this." Thus speaking to each other, they obeyed the evil counsel. They untied the sack, and straight the winds rushed forth and seized the ship, and swept the crews, lamenting bitterly, far from their country, out upon the deep. And then I woke, and in my noble mind bethought me whether I should drop at once into the deep and perish, or remain, and silently endure, and keep my place among the living. I remained, endured, and covered with my mantle lay within my galley, while the furious whirlwind bore back to the Aeolian isle our groaning crews. We landed on the coast, and to our barks brought water. Then my men prepared a meal beside the fleet, and having tasted food and wine, I took a herald and a friend, and, hastening to the sumptuous palace halls of Aeolus, I found him with his wife and children banqueting. We sat us down upon the threshold at the palace doors, and they were all astonished and inquired, "Why art thou here? What god thine enemy pursues thee, O Ulysses, whom we sent so well prepared to reach thy native land, thy home, or any place that pleased thee most?" They spake, and sorrowfully I replied, "The fault is all with my unthinking crew, and my own luckless slumber. Yet, my friends, repair the mischief, for ye have the power." Thus with submissive words I spake, but they sat mute. The Father only answered me, "Hence with thee, leave our island instantly, vilest of living men. It may not be that I receive or aid, as he departs, one who is hated by the blessed gods, and thou art hated by the gods. Away!" He spake, and sent us from the palace door, lamenting. Sorrowfully went we on. And now, with rowing hard and long, the fruit of our own folly, all our crews lost heart, and every hope of safe return was gone. 6 days and nights we sailed, the 7th we came to lofty Laestrygoni with wide gates, the city of Lamos, where, on going forth, the shepherd calls to shepherd entering in. There might a man who never yields to sleep earn double wages, first in pasturing herds, and then in tending sheep. For there the fields, grazed in the daytime, are by others grazed at night. We reached its noble haven, girt by towering rocks that rise on every side, and the bold shores run out to form its mouth, a narrow entrance. There the other crews stationed their barks and moored them close beside each other in that hill-encircled port. No billow, even the smallest, rises there. The water glimmers with perpetual calm. I only kept my dark-hulled ship without, and bound its cable to a jutting rock. I climbed a rugged headland, and looked forth. No marks of tilth appeared, the work of men or oxen, only smokes that from below rose in the air. And then I sent forth scouts to learn what race of men who live by bread inhabited the land. 2 chosen men I sent, a herald made the third, and these went inland by a level path, on which the wains brought fuel from the woody heights into the city. On their way they met before the town a damsel with an ewer, the stately daughter of Antiphates, the Lastrygonian, who was coming down to where Artasia's smoothly flowing fount gave water for the city. They drew near, and spake, and asked her who was sovereign there, and who his people. Straight she pointed out a lofty pile in which her father dwelt. They entered that proud palace, and beheld, tall as a mountain peak, the monarch's wife, and shuddered at the sight. With eager haste she called her husband, King Antiphates, from council. With a murderous intent he came, and, seizing one of my poor friends, devoured him, while the other two betook themselves to sudden flight, and reached the ships. And then he raised a fearful yell that rang through all the city. The strong Laestrygones rushed forth by thousands from all sides, more like to giants than to common men. They hurled stones of enormous weight from cliffs above, and cries of those who perished and the crash of shattered galleys rose. They speared our friends like fishes for their horrid feasts, and thus bore them away. While those within the port were slaughtered, drawing my good sword, I cut the hawsers fastened to my ship's blue prow, and cheered my men, and bade them fling themselves upon the oars, that so we might escape our threatened fate. They heard, and plied their oars like men who rowed for life. The galley shot forth from these beetling rocks into the sea full gladly. All the others perished there. Onward we sailed, with sorrow in our hearts, for our lost friends, though glad to be reprieved from death. And now we landed at an isle, Aea, where the fair-haired Circe dwelt, a goddess high in rank and skilled in song, own sister of the wise Aeetes. Both were children of the source of light, the sun, and Perse, Ocean's daughter, brought them forth. We found a haven here where ships might lie, and guided by some deity we brought our galley silently against the shore, and disembarked, and gave 2 days and nights to rest, unmanned with hardship and with grief. When bright-haired morning brought the 3rd day round, I took my spear and my good sword, and left the ship, and climbed a height, in hope to spy some trace of human toil, or hear some voice. On a steep precipice I stood, and saw from the broad earth below a rising smoke, where, midst the thickets and the forest ground, stood Circe's palace. Seeing that dark smoke, the thought arose within my mind that there I should inquire. I pondered till at last this seemed the wisest, to return at once to my good ship upon the ocean side, and give my crew their meal, and send them forth to view the region. Coming to the spot where lay my well-oared bark, some pitying god, beneath whose eye I wandered forth alone, sent a huge stag into my very path, high-horned, which from his pasture in the wood descended to the riverside to drink, for grievously he felt the hot sun's power. Him, as he ran, the first smote. The weapon pierced, just at the spine, the middle of his back. the brazen blade passed through, and with a moon he fell amid the dust, and yielded up his life. I went to him, and set my foot against him, and plucked forth the brazen spear, and left it leaning there. And then I broke lithe osiers from the shrubs, and twined of these a rope, which, doubled, was an ell in length. With that I tied the enormous creature's feet, and slung him on my neck, and brought him thus to my black ship. I used the spear to prop my steps, since he no longer could be borne upon the shoulder, aided by the hand. Such was the animal's bulk. I flung him down before the ship, encouraging my men with cheerful words, and thus I said to each, "My friends, we will not, wretched as we are, go down to Pluto's realm before our time. While food and wine are yet within the hold of our good galley, let us not forget our daily meals and famine-stricken pine." I spake, they all obeyed, and at my word came forth, and, standing by the barren deep, admired the stag, for he was huge of bulk. And when their eyes were tired with wondering, my people washed their hands, and soon had made a noble banquet ready. All that day, till set of sun, we sat and feasted there, upon the abundant meat and delicate wine. And when the sun went down, and darkness came, we slept upon the shore. But when the morn, the rosy-fingered child of dawn, looked forth, I called a council of my men, and spake, "Give ear, my friends, amid your sufferings, to words that I shall say. We cannot here know which way lies the west, nor where the east, nor where the sun, that shines for all mankind, descends below the earth, nor where again he rises from it. Yet will we consult, if room there be for counsel, which I doubt. For when I climbed that height, I overlooked an isle surrounded by the boundless deep, an isle low-lying. In the midst I saw smoke rising from a thicket of the wood. I spake, their courage died within their hearts, as they remembered what Antiphates the Laestrygon had done, and what foul deeds the cannibal Cyclops, and they wept aloud. Tears flowed abundantly, but tears were now of no avail to our unhappy band. Numbering my well-armed men, I made of them 2 equal parties, giving each its chief. Myself commanded one. Eurylochus, the hero, took the other in his charge. Then in a brazen helm we shook the lots. The lot of brave Eurylochus leaped forth, and he, with 22 of our men, went forward with quick steps, and yet in tears, while we, as sorrowful, were left behind. They found the fair abode where Circe dwelt, a palace of hewn stone within the vale, yet nobly seated. There were mountain wolves and lions round it, which herself had tamed, with powerful drugs, yet these assaulted not the visitors, but, wagging their long tails, stood on their hinder feet and fawned on them,
like mastiffs on their master when he comes from banqueting and brings them food. So fawned the strong-clawed wolves and lions on my men. With fear my men beheld those beasts of prey, yet went, and, standing in the portico of the bright-haired divinity, they heard her sweet voice singing, as within she threw the shuttle through the wide immortal web, such as is woven by the goddesses, delicate, bright of hue, and beautiful. Politus, then, a chief the most beloved and most discreet of all my comrades, spake. Someone is here, my friends, who sweetly sings, weaving an ample web, and all the floor rings to her voice. Whoever she may be, woman or goddess, let us call to her.
He spake, aloud they called, and forth aloud she came, and threw at once the shining doors apart, and bade my comrades enter. Without thought they followed her. Eurylochus alone remained without, for he suspected guile. She led them in, and seated them on thrones. Then, mingling for them Promnian wine with cheese, meal, and fresh honey, and infusing drugs into the mixture, drugs which made them lose the memory of their home, she handed them the beverage, and they drank. Then instantly she touched them with a wand, and shut them up in sties, transformed to swine in head and voice, bristles and shape, though still the human mind remained to them. Thus sorrowing they were driven into their cells, where Circe flung to them acorns of oak and ilex, and the fruit of cornel, such as nourish wallowing swine. Back came Eurylochus to our good ship, with news of our poor comrades and their fate. He strove to speak, but could not. He was stunned by that calamity. His eyes were filled with tears, and his whole soul was given to grief. We marveled greatly. Long we questioned him, and thus he spake of our lost friends at last. Through yonder thickets, as thou gavest command, illustrious chief, we went until we reached a stately palace of hewn stones within, yet nobly seated. Someone there, goddess or woman, weaving busily an ample web, sang sweetly as she wrought. My comrades called aloud, and forth she came, and threw at once the shining doors apart, and bade us enter. Without thought the rest followed, while I alone, suspecting guile, remained without. My comrades from that hour were seen no more, not one of them again came forth, though long I sat and watched for them. He spake, I slung my silver-studded sword, upon my shoulders a huge blade of brass, and my bow with it, and commanded him to lead the way. He seized and clasped my knees with both his hands in attitude of prayer, and sorrowfully said these winged words, Take me not thither, force me not to go, O foster child of Jove, but leave me here. For thou wilt not return, I know, nor yet deliver one of our lost friends. Our part is to betake ourselves to instant flight with these who yet remain, and so escape. He spake, and I replied, Eurylochus, remain thou here, beside our roomy ship, eating and drinking. I shall surely go. A strong necessity is laid on me. I spake, and from the ship and shore went up into the isle, and when I found myself within that awful valley, and not far from the great palace in which Circe dwelt, the sorceress, there met me on my way a youth. He seemed in manhood's early prime, when youth has most of grace. He took my hand and held it, and, accosting me, began,
Rash mortal, whither art thou wandering thus, alone among the hills, where every place is strange to thee? Thy comrades are shut up in Circe's palace, in close cells like swine. Comest thou to set them free? Nay, thou, like them, wilt rather find thyself constrained to stay. Let me bestow the means to make thee safe against that mischief. Take this potent herb, and bear it with thee to the palace halls of Circe, and it shall avert from thee the threatened evil. I will now reveal the treacherous arts of Circe. She will bring a mingled draught to thee, and drug the bowl, but will not harm thee thus. The virtuous plant I gave thee will prevent it. Hear yet more. When she shall smite thee with her wand, draw forth thy good sword from thy thigh, and rush at her as if to take her life. And she will crouch in fear, and will solicit thine embrace. Refuse her not, that so she may release thy comrades, and may send thee also back to thine own land. But first exact of her the solemn oath which binds the blessed gods, that she will meditate no other harm to thee, nor strip thee of thy manly strength. The Argus queller spake, and plucked from earth the potent plant, and handed it to me, and taught me all its powers. The root is black, the blossom white as milk. Among the gods its name is moly. Hard it is for men to dig it up. The gods find nothing hard. Back through the woody island Hermes went, toward high Olympus, while I took my way to Circe's halls, yet with a beating heart. There, as I stood beneath the portico of that bright-haired divinity, I called aloud. The goddess heard my voice and came, and threw at once the shining doors apart, and prayed me to come in. I followed her, yet grieving still. She led me in, and gave a seat upon a silver-studded throne, beautiful, nobly wrought, and placed beneath a footstool, and prepared a mingled draught within a golden chalice, and infused a drug with mischievous intent. She gave, I drank it off, the charm wrought not, and then she smote me with her wand and said, Go to the sty, and with thy fellows sprawl. She spake, but drawing forth the trusty sword upon my thigh, I rushed at her as if to take her life. She shrieked, and, stooping low, ran underneath my arm and clasped my knees, and uttered piteously these winged words. Who art thou? Of what race, and of what land? And who thy parents? I am wonderstruck to see that thou couldst drink that magic juice, and yield not to its power.
No living man, whoever he might be, that tasted once those drugs, or passed them o'er his lips, has yet withstood them. In thy breast a spirit dwells, not to be thus subdued. Art thou not then Ulysses, master of wise stratagems, whose coming hither, on his way from Troy, in his black galley, oft has been foretold by Hermes of the golden wand? But sheath thy sword, and share my couch, that, joined in love, each may hereafter trust the other's faith." She spake, and I replied, "How canst thou ask, O Circe, that I gently deal with thee, since thou in thine own palace hast transformed my friends to swine, and plottest even now to keep me with thee, luring me to pass into thy chamber and to share thy couch, that thou mayst strip me of my manly strength? I come not to thy couch till thou engage, O goddess, by a solemn oath that thou wilt never seek to do me further harm." I spake. She straightway took the oath required, and, after it was uttered and confirmed, up to her sumptuous couch I went. Meanwhile 4 diligent maidens ministered within the palace, servants of the household they, who had their birth from fountains and from groves, and sacred rivers flowing to the sea. One spread the thrones with gorgeous coverings. Above was purple arras, and beneath were linen webs. Another, setting forth the silver tables just before the thrones, placed on them canisters of gold. A third mingled the rich wines in a silver bowl, and placed the golden cups. And last, the fourth, brought water from the fountain, and beneath a massive tripod kindled a great fire, and warmed the water. When it boiled within the shining brass, she led me to the bath, and washed me from the tripod. On my head and shoulders pleasantly she shed the streams, that from my members took away the sense of weariness, unmanning body and mind. And when she thus had bathed me, and with oil anointed me, she put a princely cloak and tunic on me, led me in, and showed my seat, a stately silver-studded throne, high wrought, and placed a footstool for my feet. Then came a handmaid with a golden ewer, and from it poured pure water for my hands into a silver laver. Next she placed a polished table near to me, on which the matron of the palace laid the feast, with many delicacies from her store, and bade me eat. The banquet pleased me not. My thoughts were elsewhere. Dark imaginations were in my mind. When Circe marked my mood, as in a gloomy reverie I sat, and put not forth my hands to touch the feast, she came to me, and spake these winged words. "Why sittest thou like one who has no power of speech, Ulysses, wrapped in thoughts that gnaw thy heart, and tasting neither food nor wine? Still dost thou dream of fraud? It is not well that thou shouldst fear it longer, since I pledged myself against it with a mighty oath." She spake, and I replied, "What man whose heart is faithful could endure to taste of food or wine till he should see his captive friends once more at large? If with a kind intent thou bidst me eat and drink, let me behold with mine own eyes my dear companions free. I spake, and Circe took her wand and went forth from her halls, and opening the gate that closed the sty, drove forth what seemed a herd of swine in their 9th year. They ranged themselves before her, and she went from each to each, and shed on them another drug. Forthwith fell from their limbs the bristles which had grown all over them, when mighty Circe gave at first the baleful potion. Now again my friends were men, and younger than before, and of a nobler mien and statelier growth. They knew me all, and each one pressed my hand in his, and there were tears and sobs of joy that sounded through the palace. Circe, too, the mighty goddess, she drew near, and stood by me, and spake these winged words. Son of Laertes, nobly born and wise, Ulysses, go to thy good ship beside the sea, and draw it up the beach, and hide the goods and weapons in the caverns there, and come thou back, and bring with thee thy friends.
She spake, and easily my generous mind was moved by what she said. Forthwith I went to my good ship beside the sea, and found my friends in tears, lamenting bitterly. As in some grange, the calves come leaping round, a herd of kine, returning to the stall, from grassy fields where they have grazed their fill. Nor can the stall contain the young, which spring around their mothers with continual bleat. So, when my comrades saw me through their tears, they sprang to meet me, and their joy was such as if they were in their own native land, and their own city, on the rugged coast of Ithaca, where they were born and reared. And as they wept, they spake these winged words. O foster child of Jove, we welcome thee on thy return with a delight as great, as if we all had reached again the land that gave us birth, our Ithaca. And now tell by what death our other friends have died. They spake. I answered with consoling words. First, draw our galley up the beach, and hide our goods and all our weapons in the caves. And then let all make haste to follow me, and see our friends in Circe's sacred halls, eating and drinking at the plenteous board. I spake, and cheerfully my men obeyed, save that Eurylochus alone essayed to hold them back, and spake these winged words. Ah, whither are we going, wretched ones? Are ye so eager for an evil fate, that ye must go where Circe dwells, who waits to turn us into lions, swine, or wolves? Forced to remain and guard her spacious house. So was it with the Cyclops, when our friends went with this daring chief to his abode, and perished there through his foolhardiness. He spake, and then I thought to draw my sword from my stout thigh, and with the trenchant blade strike off his head and let it fall to earth, though he were my near kinsman. Yet the rest restrained me, each one speaking kindly words. Nay, foster child of Jove, if thou consent, this man shall stay behind and with the ship, and he shall guard the ship, but lead us thou to where the sacred halls of Circe stand." They spake, and from the ship and shore went up into the land. Nor was Eurylochus left with the ship. He followed, for he feared my terrible threat. Meantime had Circe bathed my comrades at the palace, and with oil anointed them, and robed them in fair cloaks and tunics. There we found them banqueting. When they and those who came with me beheld each other, and the memory of the past came back to them, they wept abundantly, and all the palace echoed with their sobs. And then the mighty goddess came and said,
"Son of Laertes, nobly born and wise, prolong thou not these sorrows. Well I know what ye have suffered on the fishy deep, and all the evil that malignant men have done to you on land. Now take the food before you, drink the wine, till ye receive into your hearts the courage that was yours when long ago ye left your fatherland, the rugged Ithaca. Ye are unnerved and spiritless with thinking constantly on your long wanderings, and your minds allow no space for mirth, for ye have suffered much." She spake, her words persuaded easily our generous minds, and there from day to day we lingered a full year, and banqueted nobly on plenteous meats and delicate wines. But when the year was ended, and the hours renewed their circle, my beloved friends from Circe's palace called me forth, and said, "Good chief, do not forget thy native land. If fate indeed permit that ever thou return in safety to that lofty pile, thy palace in the country of thy birth." So spake they, and my generous mind was moved. All that day long, until the set of sun, we sat and feasted on the abundant meats and delicate wines. And when the sun went down, they took their rest within the darkened halls, while I to Circe's sumptuous couch went up, a suppliant at her knees. The goddess heard my prayer, as thus in winged words I said, "O Circe, make, I pray, the promise good which thou hast given, to send me to my home. My heart is pining for it, and the hearts of all my friends, who weary out my life, lamenting round me when thou art not nigh." I spake, the mighty goddess thus replied, "Son of Laertes, nobly born and wise, Ulysses, ye must not remain with me unwillingly. But ye have yet to make another voyage, and must visit first the abode of Pluto, and of Proserpine, his dreaded queen, and there consult the soul of the blind seer Tiresias, him of Thebes, whose intellect was spared, for Proserpine gave back to him in death the power of mind, that only he might know of things to come. The rest are shades that flit from place to place." Thus spake the goddess, and my heart was wrung, and I sat upon the couch and wept, nor could I longer wish to live and see the light of day. But when my grief, with shedding tears and tossing where I sat, was somewhat spent, I spake to Circe thus, "O Circe, who will guide me when I make this voyage? for no galley built by man has ever yet arrived at Pluto's realm. I spake, the mighty goddess answered me, Son of Laertes, nobly born and wise, take thou no thought of who shall guide thy bark, but raise the mast and spread the glimmering sail, and seat thyself, and let the north wind waft thy galley on. As soon as thou shalt cross Oceanus, and come to the low shore, and groves of Proserpine, the lofty groups of poplars, and the willows that let fall their withered fruit, moor thou thy galley there, in the deep eddies of Oceanus, and pass to Pluto's comfortless abode. There into Acheron are poured the streams of Pyriphlegethon, and of that arm of Styx, Cocytus. At the place where meet the ever-roaring waters stands a rock. Draw near to that, and there I bid thee scoop in earth a trench, a cubit long and wide. And round about it pour to all the dead libations, milk and honey first, and next rich wine, and lastly water, scattering white meal upon them. Offer there thy prayer fervently to that troop of airy forms, and make the vow that thou wilt sacrifice, when thou at last shalt come to Ithaca, a heifer without blemish, barren yet, in thine own courts, and heap the altar pyre with things of price. And to the seer alone, Tiresias by himself, a ram whose fleece is wholly black, the best of all thy flocks. And after thou hast duly offered prayer to all the illustrious nations of the dead, then sacrifice a ram and a black ewe, their faces turned toward Erebus, but thine the other way, and toward the river streams. Thither the souls of those who died will flock in multitudes. Then call thy friends, and give command to flay in haste the sheep that lie slain by the cruel brass, and, burning there the carcasses, pay worship to the gods, the powerful Pluto and dread Proserpine. Draw then the sword upon thy thigh, and sit, and suffer none of all those airy forms to touch the blood until thou first bespeak Tiresias. He will come, and speedily, the leader of the people, and will tell what voyage thou must make, what length of way thou yet must measure, and will show thee how thou mayst return across the fishy deep. She spake, and while she spake, the morn looked forth upon her golden throne. The nymph bestowed on me a cloak and tunic, and arrayed herself in a white robe with ample folds, a delicate web and graceful. Round her loins she clasped a shining zone of gold, and hung a veil upon her forehead. Forth I went throughout the palace, and aroused my friends, and thus I said in cheerful tones to each, Number longer give yourselves to idle rest and pleasant slumber. We are to depart. The gracious Circe counsels us to go. I spake, and easily their generous minds inclined to me. Yet brought I not away all my companions safely from the isle. Elpenor was the youngest of our band. Not brave in war was he, nor wise in thought. He, overcome with wine, and for the sake of coolness, had lain down to sleep, apart from all the rest, in Circe's sacred house. And as my friends bestirred themselves, the noise and tumult roused him. He forgot to come by the long staircase. Headlong from the roof he plunged. His neck was broken at the spine, and his soul went to the abode of death. My friends came round me, and I said to them, Haply your thought may be that ye are bound for the dear country of your birth. But know that Circe sends us elsewhere to consult the Theban seer Tiresias in the abode of Pluto and the dreaded Proserpine. I spake, and their hearts failed them as they heard. They sat them down, and wept, and tore their hair. But fruitless were their sorrow and their tears. Thus, as we sadly moved to our good ship upon the seashore, weeping all the while, Circe, meantime, had visited its deck, and there had bound a ram and a black ewe, by means we saw not. For what eye discerns the presence of a deity, who moves from place to place, and wills not to be seen?
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy the experience, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. See you in the next video.